to this new episode of our show. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Alec Ross. Alec is a New York Times best-selling author and a distinguished professor at the Business School of the University of Bologna. He has authored several books, and these books have been translated in 24 languages and basically have been bestsellers on 5 continents. He's a board advisor. He was also a senior advisor for innovation to the Secretary of State during the Obama administration. And today he's very active as a public speaker, and he has received several awards for his work. So, Alec, it's a pleasure to have you on our show, and we look forward to discussing the future of value chains with you.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
So, Alec, I just read a few things about your experience from your biography, but maybe you can add a little bit of color about your work over the years and what you're doing today.
Sure. Well, goodness, there's lots of color. So I'm from West Virginia, which is sort of like the Calabria of the United States. You know, it's a very poor part of the United States. And, you know, it's funny, I was talking to my kids the other day about what I would do when I was their age for the summers. And I did work like I worked on a beer truck. I worked in factories. And so I come from the world of West Virginia, sort of the old working class. But then because I worked hard in school and because that was still a period where the American dream was still working pretty well, I worked hard, became a school teacher. One of the things that I noticed with my students, I taught in a very, very poor school in Baltimore, 800 students, all black, all poor. But I noticed that they were all like fish in water when it came to the use of technology. So I created a company. I had a startup, the purpose of which was to help people from poor communities, whether they were rural and white, whether they were urban and black, get the skills to join the technology workforce. And this is 25 years ago. So this was like good timing. When more important than anything else is timing. It's better It's better to have good timing than be right. So I was an entrepreneur. While I was an entrepreneur, I did that for 8 years. I got to know Barack Obama. When he decided to run for president, I worked for him running technology and media policy for his first presidential campaign. And then I worked for him after he became president. I spent 4 years running the innovation agenda at the State Department as Hillary Clinton's senior advisor for innovation. And then 10 or 12 years since then, I've been writing, I've been teaching, and I've been investing. So, investing in everything from high tech to a bakery. So I have a very sort of interdisciplinary life.
And what do they have in common, bakery and tech?
It's excellent. In this case, what I really focus on are two things. One, excellence. Whatever you invest in, invest in the best. Like, don't invest in an okay bakery, invest in the best bakery. Don't invest in just any tech, invest in what you think the best is. And the second thing is things that I think make the world a better place.
Good.
So I would be richer, I'd be much wealthier if I chose to invest in things where it was just about making money. But I can't help myself. I only invest in things where I think that if the product works, it makes the world a better place. So that's true in tech and it's true in bakeries.
Good. Love that.
That's an amazing story that I don't know how many know. End of the day, let's start to go, into the topics we are here for. You have a broad experience, and of course, you faced a lot of what globalization was, especially in the early days. In the last 30 years, a lot of things happened, like from coronavirus to a multitude of wars and, more broadly, geopolitical tensions. In the last 10 years, especially in the last 5 years, we noticed a rising trend about, globalization may be still actually in terms of more of the market, but in terms of supply chains or maybe better value chains, something more regional is happening. Is regionalization is happening? Is that the trend? How do you see that?
Sure. So look, globalization was never a straight line. It's always been bumpy, right? And we've never lived in a world of a truly free market. There have always been aspects of it that are more free than others. I guess where I see is less than regionalization. And certainly there are regionalization. What I see are new alliances within value chains. So let me explain myself for a second, being sort of the historian I am by background. If you think about the first wave of, if you think about 1945 to 1989, the principal economic binary in the world was democratic capitalism sponsored by the United States and Western Europe against Soviet Union sponsored communism. It was really simple. And then after 1989, 1990, there was a sense of the triumph of the democratic form of capitalism. But we know that it was the reality was much more complex. We know that China had its own model, India had its own model. There were different models for how countries would enter into the market. And what I see right now is I see supply chains that have what are called geopolitical swing states. Meaning there are some countries that sometimes align with and are part of the value chains of certain other countries, and others that detach from them. So we've seen a bit of an uncoupling, though not totally, between the United States and China. We've seen certain countries that play between the United States and China, the Gulf states, India, and others. And then we see other countries more aligning themselves with one or the other. And so while regionalization plays a role in it, I think geopolitical affiliation has more to do with it. So in Africa, for example, we see, even though a lot of African states are not in China's region, we see the intensity of the trade relationships and of the value chains growing closer between a lot of Africa and a lot of China. Similarly, the United States, in many respects, I think has grown closer to India, even though they are very far apart. So
Yeah.
region plays a role, but I think geopolitical stripes matter more.
And do you believe, Alec, that the geopolitical scenario and tensions are the main driver that is in a way reshaping value chains, or there are additional drivers on top of the politics and geopolitics?
There are additional drivers, but geopolitics is number one, number two, and number three.
Okay.
It just,
Okay.
geopolitics, pure economics would tell you that the United States and China, for example, should have as free and frictionless trade as possible.
Yeah,
But geopolitical tensions and rivalries between the United States and China, cyber attacks, and other such things cause each to sort of withdraw from the other. And we're actually
Yeah.
seeing a lot of the effect of this on China's economy. China's had a terrible economy for the last 3, 4, or 5 years. It would have been much stronger if it had worked more closely with the United States. Similarly, I think India is a country that's very, very smart about never losing an opportunity. It's not going to be part of the sanctions regimes in Ukraine. It's going to work freely with China. It's going to work freely with the United States. So some countries actually use geopolitical competition as a way of advantaging their own position. I do think that there are other factors. A lot of it has to do with regulatory regimes where certain countries are resource rich and what have you, but geopolitics really is the dominant factor right now.
I see. And as you know, Alec, being a sustainability professor, I like to analyze business from ESG lenses, and I'm wondering if you see ESG factors coming at play at some point in these global regional dynamics, even if it's not in the top three. Do they play a role?
Yeah.
Pivoted a lot of its energy policy in interests of sustainability under ESG goals. And so we saw the impact of that in value chains. We saw the impact of that in the economy over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And now we see Trump sort of ferociously attacking that and essentially demanding, as part of a commercial agreement between the United States and Europe, hey, doesn't matter what your ESG goals are, here's $750 billion worth of liquefied natural gas that you have to buy. So we can see that the ESG agenda, in a certain respects, it's like a football on the pitch, getting passed and back and forth and being stolen from one team to another. So it is relevant. It is relevant. What's going to be interesting to me to see is if the Europeans continue to aggressively pursue a more sustainable form of energy production and consumption, even while they're buying $750 billion worth of liquefied natural gas from the United States. I've always posited that if the Europeans really concentrated and became the global leaders, the protagonists in sustainable clean energy, then that then would position them on the 196 country chessboard. But if they withdraw from that a little bit,
Yeah,
you're handing things back to the Chinese and other states.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, understood.
yeah, sorry if I can jump in
Go,
with
go.
up question, but I was, for example, teaching in China in May, Alec, and I was teaching strategy, not sustainability, and I guess it was for me the first time there, to receive many questions with a focus on sustainability from local, business people. And at a certain point, I tried to understand, why they were raising these questions. And at the end, my realization was the fact that for the first time, they were feeling the pressure of the new directives of the European Union in China, on the top of the general international pressure, national clients. So somehow it seems that these directives are reaching out to other organizations. Is that something that potentially could be another driver in the ESG space, even if what you described in terms of dynamics between the European Union and the US going in a certain direction? Is there another dynamic between the US and other regions?
It could be. Look, now is a tough time to be a champion of the ESG agenda. And in the same way in which I said globalization, it was never a straight line.
Yeah,
It's choppy. That's the same with every major policy agenda, ESG of which is one. So I think now is a time when I think a lot of the premise behind many of the ESG goals and strategies and directives are being challenged. I think that's going to continue for at least another year, maybe 18 months. But over the medium to long term, meaning 5 years plus, I think it can shape markets. I think it can increasingly shape value chains. But it's a tough moment right now. ESG had a moment. Now it's having a challenge. I do think that it is there are the right set of strategies baked within it for the future. But now is a tricky moment. Now is one of those moments where
yeah,
Yeah, remaining on the stakeholder issue thing, and also pivoting to supply chain slash value chain, but better from an operational standpoint. Which are the greatest factor, the most important factor you see right now in this world, and also understood geopolitical is one, two, three, but also which are the others one under these lands.
well, I'll tell you, look, I mean, there are obviously lots of them that are very important. The one that I think is dominating my attention, and I think a lot of others, is climate. For the very simple reason that, anybody who's paying any attention recognizes the impact that climate change is having on the world. When I think about Italy, the weather of North Africa is now the weather of Sicily. The weather of Sicily is the weather of Rome. The weather of Rome is the weather
not that.
of northern Italy. I'm talking to you today from the United States. The weather is totally changed in the United States. We have once a century storms every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
We have once a decade storms every 2 or 3 months. And it's having a concrete financial impact, irrespective of what your politics are. And
Yeah.
so I do think that responding to climate is something, particularly younger generations. Everybody who's under the age of 40 has grown up with climate being issue number one, for them in many respects. And so that behind geopolitics, and I know that the two are not completely disconnected, they're related, but I think climate is at the very top of the agenda.
So maybe related to, from an operational perspective, resilience. That means flexibility. That means a shorter supply chain. That means everything we said in the beginning of this episode with probably regionalization. So shortening like supply chain equals to providing more flexible, answer to whatever the demand is, but also a reaction to all of that, right?
And also redundancy. So sole
And also
sourcing.
redundancy.
Redundancy is a big thing. So I think I sit on 8 different boards of directors. And one of the things, whether it's a big public company or whether it's a startup, is in response in part to climate change. Um, we cannot be sole source dependent for any good or any
Yeah,
service.
yeah.
And so that's a big factor in things as well.
And Alec, being so active in boards and working across industries as well, have you seen or you came across any kind of specific projects of value chain restructuring that got your attention that maybe are worth sharing with our audience?
Sure. I mean, I'll give you an example from one board of directors that I sit on, just to show how what we might think of as old industry is very much oriented to the 21st century. So I sit on the board of directors of a company called Pelliconi, and we make bottle caps and other fasteners. Seems super boring, like from the 1900s, right? But we make 40 billion a year. So
Oh,
wait, 40 billion. So when you were in China, what city were you teaching in China?
I was in Beijing.
So if you did you drink a beer when you were in Beijing? Did you ever drink a beer? Okay. And where are you now?
I'm now in Perugia, in
You're
Italy.
now in Perugia. All right. When you drank a beer in Beijing and you drank a beer in Perugia, in Umbria and central in Italy, and tonight when I drink a beer in Baltimore, they're all made by my company. Whether you're in Beijing, Perugia, or Baltimore, all made by this company in Italy.
And I
And so,
guess the same for New York too, right?
same for New York too, yes.
Okay. All
Exactly.
right.
And so here's what's interesting to come to value chains. We looked at this as it related to artificial intelligence. 3 or 4 years ago, in the middle of COVID, we were trying to figure out, and as there was early development in AI, it was not the hyped technology that it is today, but we were still witness to what was happening. We decided to make massive investments in AI as a way of reshaping our value chains, as a way of essentially doing 3 things. Number one, the remote direction of our lines of production so that we could sit in Italy and direct our factory in South Africa, direct our factory in China, direct our factory in Orlando, Florida. Number two, from a sustainability side, the management of our waste products. So when you produce 40 billion aluminum bottle caps a year, there's potentially a lot of waste. And using AI as a way of managing those waste systems and being increasingly sustainable. And then thirdly, predictive maintenance. And so what we've done essentially at this bottle cap company, this Italian bottle cap company that now dominates the world, we've essentially rebuilt our value chain using AI. And what it's done, interestingly, is it's taken our high cost labor market, Italy,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
enabled us to run a global enterprise and compete in the face of globalization in a way that would have been really difficult 10, 15, 20 years ago. So
Okay.
as we know, really highly developed economies, whether they were American, whether they were British, whether they were Central or Western European, oftentimes lost because the production of a good or service in a lower cost labor market um, was more competitive than the one being produced in New York or the Midlands in the UK or in Piedmont in Italy. But now with AI, I see value chains being reshaped a little bit because it's massively increasing productivity and it's making instead of the unit cost of labor being more important, the unit cost of knowledge is increasingly important. So I actually see AI is having a fairly dramatic impact on value
Amazing.
chains as it goes into sectors like manufacturing. AI is not just ChatGPT and other LLMs. There is predictive AI,
Yeah.
there's generative AI, there is agentic AI, and there's physical AI, and these are reshaping value chains.
Let me, catch, what you said in the last 3 minutes because, felt excited because, hey, I did a PhD on the reshoring. And what you said, let's go off track for 3 minutes only. What you said is definitely a big topic here. That means technologies really could be a key factor to make jobs now sounding like a political stuff, but it's not. Bring jobs back to West in a broader sense, because as you said, enabling to understand better on maintenance or planning, as you said, or production capabilities, even if in a country as Italy is, with labor costs such high and also taxation such high, and I mean the sector you are in is really not 50% ABD, right? So it's like small margins. So real competition, and compared to like Far East, Western like countries always look at that as, hey, there's no chance we're going to compete with them. Is that right? Number one question. Number two question, that could be a trend then.
So the answer is yes. And the word that I would change is the word could. It's not could. It's not a theoretical anymore. It's happening. So, like, I'll come back to my bottle cap company. We did this 3 years ago. What happened? Our margins went.
Exactly.
We've nearly doubled our revenues in 3 or 4 years, while we've nearly doubled our margins. So this is not a theoretical. This is actual. This is real world,
That's
and this
amazing to
is
hear.
yeah. And so there, it's still early, um, but it's happening. And so the interest for me, this is like the mid 1990s with the internet. Early adopters are, sure, there are going to be mistakes, but they're also the ones planting their flags, learning most quickly. I mean, people need to remember Amazon started by selling books on the internet. Google was something that was a search engine embedded in Yahoo. And, so look, we are in a point right now in traditional industries, in mining, in manufacturing, in logistics, where AI is already demonstrating results. And if you look at what's happening even right now in the United States, at the productivity numbers are going way up. And everybody is
Yeah.
saying it's because of AI. Everybody waited to see increased productivity numbers because of digitization, and we never saw productivity numbers equal to the hope with
Yeah.
digitization, but we are seeing them with AI.
Yeah, definitely yes. And thanks for sharing, Alex. Super helpful. Uh, do you have any in your like super long career and across the world some examples, some benchmarks, some best practices, or just the stories, a couple of them you want to share with us?
Sure. I mean, the first thing that I would say is for managers, with all of this, the best practice that I would draw out is highly demographically diverse teams. So when I come into a boardroom or I come in and I'm meeting with senior executives of a company, if everybody is the same age and looks exactly the same, if it's just a bunch of 60-year-old white men, I know they're going to get their lunch eaten by somebody else. So Francesco, with a lot of these emerging technologies, if we're honest, people in their 20s and 30s are much more naturally adept at them than people my age in their 50s and people who are older. So what I'm telling a lot of CEOs is hack your team and bring people who are younger into these discussions, to figure out strategies that people who have been doing this work for 30 years are not going to see. My venture fund has invested about $900 million in a little bit more than 50 startups on 5 continents. I'm 53 years old. I think I'm still young. I feel young, 53 years old. But every single CEO of these more than 53 investments is younger than me. Uh, and why is that? It's because they see the world with fresh eyes. And so, what I would say is a fil rouge, a common thread that I'm seeing everywhere in the world is that the most successful teams are those that are bringing fresh perspectives in or bringing younger people in to look at their supply chains with fresh eyes. If you've been
Yeah.
part of maintaining a supply chain for 20 and 25 years,
Yeah.
there are things you don't see anymore because they're just sort of fixed
Yeah.
realities. But people seeing some of these supply chains and value chains with fresh eyes, they see things that you don't. They see opportunities that you don't. And honestly, age matters. It just does.
So diversification could be the key. So to like really puzzling every light, on the same thing, and that could be a key, hopefully.
I think so. And even when I see companies stagnate, um, it's oftentimes like if you Google, I would argue stagnated 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And it's because the culture and the human capital within Google hardened. Then about 2, 3 years ago, they were just like, all right, we're stagnating. We've grown fat, we've grown comfortable. And they sort of took an entirely new approach to how they were going to organize themselves, how they manage their human capital. And again, Google went from being very boring and non-dynamic to now I think that some of the dynamism is coming back. So I really think that being willing to inject new ideas, energy, and people into your processes is incredibly important.
Very interesting.
Thanks for sharing.
I was trying, Alec, in my mind to kind of recap what you said, and I guess few takeaways were very clear from this conversation. First of all, when we look at the future of value chains, the geopolitics play a major key role. Okay, so that is a driver. Second, AI not any longer a promise, a revolution that is happening and is kind of reshaping productivity, business models, and potentially, I guess, global manufacturing logics. ESG relevant, but a topic that has got its ups and downs, and therefore the engagement and the weight of that driver, changes with time.
And
Now,
human
yeah,
capital and skill
human
set
capital
combined.
as a key asset and diverse human capital as a key asset. Now, I guess these are the drivers I guess shaping a competition today. Now, I would like to close basically the conversation by asking you to, I guess, predict the future if that is possible. But at least to express a viewpoint about the drivers in the future. This means if we look at, let's say, the world 5 years from now or 7 years from now, do you see these drivers remaining day drivers, or do you see new drivers coming at play, or one of these drivers becoming more relevant than others?
So I think that these are going to be the big drivers for the next 5 to 7 years. One thing that I would say is the next 5 to 7 years are going to be very, very volatile. We need to get used to the idea that volatility is the new normal. We're not going to wake up one morning and be like, oh, everything returned to normal. No, normal is volatile.
Yeah.
And so if you go back to one of the early parts of our conversation, we talked about adaptability and agility.
Yeah.
And so adaptability and agility, the ability to be nimble, to be fast, to have redundancies built into your planning and into your systems and into your supply chains are fundamental. So again, this is not negative. Volatility doesn't mean negative. The trajectory may be net positive, but how you get there is going to be very volatile. And a lot of companies are going to get wiped out because on downslopes, they weren't correctly planned. Part of what I do see, I see an enormous amount of risk capital going into highly innovative startups. So I think in 5 to 7 years, we're all going to be obsessed with 2, 3, 4, 5 companies whose names we don't know now. In the same way in which 5 years ago, nobody heard of NVIDIA. Nobody was really talking about NVIDIA 5 years ago. It existed, but nobody was talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's the world's only $4 trillion company today in terms of valuation. I think that there are going to be more NVIDIAs. There are going to be more companies that nobody's talking about today that are going to be massive in the next 5, 6, or 7 years. And it's going to come part because they built new innovative products, but also because they destroyed others. So Intel, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Intel was a monster. It was a giant. Today, it's broken. Built something new, but it also ate Intel. We are going to see that not just in technology, but we're going to see that in a variety of different sectors.
Very interesting. Alec, it was truly a pleasure to have you in our show, and congratulations for all the good work you are doing and the great ideas that you are sharing around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Alec.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.